so the 1980s were a real doozy. When Ronald Reagan decided to run for president, his first campaign was in Philadelphia, Mississippi, the site where 3 civil rights workers were killed in 1964. And in his speech, he made the statement that he wanted to make America great as it was in the 1950s. Right, very familiar, exactly, that's why I'm saying it. And I'm reminded of Don McLean's song, Bye Bye Miss American Pie. It deals with this whole kind of conversation on how the 50s were really the precursors to the 60s, and it was a lot going on, but most people don't know that. They think it was all American. But with this being said, when Reagan was put into office, his job was to flatten all political gains that had been enjoyed, particularly the Civil Rights Act of 1965, which buttresses the 14th Amendment, which grants equal protection and due process under the law, i.e. citizenship, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that comes out of my hometown of Selma, Alabama, which buttresses the 15th Amendment, which grants universal suffrage in this context. And what we begin to see here is the creation of what I call the Black New South. And where we see black folk that are working in their own behest in terms of politics, political empowerment, and electoral politics. And so Reagan is in office to do away with all of that. And just as Ms. Young stated, Atlanta was receiving about $49 million in federal funding. That dwindled to $9 million. And so when Ambassador Young is pushed to run for mayor, when Susan LaBorde calls him out and said, Andy, you were nobody before you came to us. And so you need to run for mayor. Maynard Jackson had a dinner and invited Ambassador Young, and Ambassador Young didn't know what was about to happen, and then it happened. And so what happens in this is Ambassador Young had to figure out ways to shore up that $40 million. And as UN ambassador, he had interacted with all kind of diplomats and potentates in the Caribbean and Africa in areas where he had to go and work to stave off the Soviets. So this is some Cold War politicking working, and he's able to get them to be interested in and investing in a global black Mecca, and what this does is it brings Europe. And so as a result of this, one of the things that we see is how an Ambassador Young has to navigate crack cocaine, AIDS, post-industrial conditioning, which moves the industry of the United States from the industrial conversation to the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, to make sure that the Russians would be beat in a nuclear war. That's what this whole thing was about. And so he's moving and navigating in that. And there were a couple of hiccups along the way. I mean, the killing of Eddie Lee Callahan, which sparked some rebut. Callahan was shot in the back, and folks were angry. The other was, there's another gentleman that was killed in 1987 who, he died in police custody. It's believed that he swallowed some bags of crack cocaine, and so he OD'd. But the conversation of crack cocaine coming to Atlanta pushed Ambassador Young to look at hollow point bullets because it would knock someone back who was high off crack cocaine. One of the offsets of crack cocaine is that it makes you numb. So, using particular kind of bullets versus the other, it became a public safety issue. And in this, we see the creation of the Red Dog Police. This is the militarization of the police. And this, the Red Dogs existed until they killed a 95, 96-year-old woman a couple of years ago, and they had to be disbanded. We see all of this getting ready for the Democratic National Convention, which is the dress rehearsal. There is no, I'm going to speculate, it was the dress rehearsal because in 1987 is when the Georgia Amateur Games Foundation was founded, and when the Olympic idea was really passed forth, it was already in full mobility. And there's a long conversation around Ambassador Young and Billy Payne and the conversation that they had, and Jean Charles Young and her International Year of the Child, and all of those conversations that is worth having, but we don't have the time for that today. Right on. And so the 1980s is a particular moment where there are national crises going on. The fight between the Jamaican posses and the Zopound, the Haitian Zopound, known as the Miami Boys and the Atlanta Hustlers, that bring automatic weapons to the city. So you have some real issues in terms of crime. In 1990, Atlanta was deemed the most violent city in the United States. There were 16,097 violent crimes in this city, and it won the Olympic Games in that year. So it was seen as the Olympics was an opportunity to kind of gloss over some of the things, but I'm getting ahead of myself in saying that.